Some buildings become eternal. The pyramids have stood for 4,500 years. The Colosseum survived the fall of Rome. The Parthenon still watches over Athens. These monuments outlasted the empires that built them, proof that stone and ambition can defy time itself. But what about the buildings that didn't survive? The ones just as magnificent, just as important, just as legendary, that vanished completely. In this video, I use modern AI tools to reconstruct these lost structures from historical records, archaeological sites, drawings, and paintings, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through spaces that haven't existed for centuries. We begin with perhaps the most mysterious structure on this list, in ancient Babylon around 600 BCE. This 19th century illustration shows how artists imagined the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But this is just speculation because the truth is we have no idea what they actually looked like. Notice how I've kept the vivid colors from the original illustration, because this is fantasy, but it's fantasy that represents something deeper. Humanity's defiance of nature itself. Green rising impossibly from desert heat. The legend says a king built it for his homesick wife. Whether true or not, that story endured because it spoke to power, love, and ambition. When evidence vanishes, imagination fills the void. So did this building never exist? There's no clear answer to that, but what we do know is this. What you're seeing now is a reconstruction based on how Greek and Roman writers described it centuries later. Their words brought to life through AI. But here's the problem. No Babylonian records mention it, even though they documented everything else. These Greek and Roman authors never saw it themselves. They were repeating stories. They described terrace platforms, exotic trees, and water lifted by mechanical systems. But were they describing reality, or repeating a legend that had already grown larger than life? Some scholars now think the gardens might have been in Nineveh, not Babylon, 300 miles north, because Assyrian records do describe a magnificent royal garden built by King Sennacherib, complete with irrigation systems and exotic plants. From myth to monument, in 331 BCE, Alexander the Great founded a city on Egypt's Mediterranean coast, and on a small island just off the harbor rose one of the tallest structures the ancient world had ever seen. This is how archaeologist Hermann Thiersch reconstructed the Lighthouse of Alexandria in 1909, based on ancient coins, descriptions, and ruins he found at the site. Unlike the Hanging Gardens, this structure definitely existed. Thiersch's reconstruction wasn't guesswork. He studied ancient coins that showed the lighthouse, read dozens of eyewitness accounts, and examined the actual ruins still visible in Alexandria's harbor. His drawing became the foundation for how we imagine it today. The pharos stood over 100 meters tall, roughly 30 stories, making it the tallest structure on Earth for over 1,000 years. 3 distinct tiers, a square base, an octagonal middle section, and a circular top where fire burned every night. Now imagine you're a merchant sailor approaching Alexandria after weeks at sea. The sun is setting and suddenly you see it. A tower of white marble rising impossibly high above the harbor. Fire blazing at its peak. But what if we ignore Thiersch's drawing entirely? This reconstruction comes purely from ancient eyewitness accounts, their words translated directly into AI. The descriptions don't always agree on details, but the core remains consistent. 3 tiers, white stone, fire at the peak, visible for miles. Some accounts mention a massive mirror at the top that could reflect sunlight by day and magnify fire by night. Possibly myth, possibly early optics. A series of earthquakes between the 10th and 14th centuries gradually brought it down. By 1480, its stones were being used to build a fortress. Alexandria lost more than just the lighthouse. The Great Library, home to hundreds of thousands of ancient texts, was also destroyed through fires and neglect over the centuries. An entire world of knowledge gone. The lighthouse guided ships for 15 centuries. The library preserved the thoughts of civilizations. Both vanished, leaving only fragments and memories behind. Around 280 BCE, on the Greek island of Rhodes, a massive bronze statue rose above the harbor. At least that's the legend. This is how the world imagined the Colossus of Rhodes for centuries. This 1572 engraving is the earliest known depiction in modern times. A giant bronze statue straddling the harbor, ships sailing between its legs. It's iconic and it's completely impossible. A statue standing like this would have blocked the harbor during the 12 years it took to build. Ancient sources never describe it this way, but this myth stuck. For over 400 years, this is what people imagined, and many people still picture it this way today. The real Colossus was just as remarkable, it just didn't look like this. This is an AI reconstruction based purely on ancient eyewitness descriptions. The Colossus stood on a marble pedestal near the harbor entrance, not straddling it. Over 30 meters tall, it depicted Helios, the sun god. The Rhodians built it as a victory monument after defending their island from a massive siege in 305 BCE. They melted down enemy bronze and shaped it into plates, assembling them piece by piece over an iron framework. Not cast as one solid statue, and it stood for just 56 years. In 226 BCE, an earthquake snapped it at the knees. Here's the strangest part. It lay broken near the harbor for over 800 years. People traveled to Rhodes just to see the fallen giant. In 654 CE, it was finally sold for scrap, reportedly taking 900 camels to carry away. The Colossus stood for barely a lifetime. Its legend has lasted over 2,000 years. These wonders proved what humanity could achieve in the ancient world. But wonders alone don't build empires. Infrastructure does. For example, military infrastructure built to control the seas and dominate trade. For centuries, one empire ruled the Western Mediterranean, not Rome, but Carthage. A sea-based trading empire with ports from North Africa to Spain. And at its center was something few know about. A harbor unlike any other in the ancient world. Unlike earlier structures, no medieval artists depicted the Khathan. When Rome destroyed Carthage in 146 BCE, they wiped it out so completely it was forgotten. This AI reconstruction uses only Roman accounts and modern archaeology. The Khathan was a circular military harbor for 220 warships, hidden by high walls. In its center was an island command post, the naval HQ for a maritime superpower. Ships were kept in covered docks around the edge, protected and ready. This wasn't just a harbor, it was a weapon. Picture standing on those docks, smelling tar and salt, hearing oars being prepped, crews readying for action. From this viewpoint, admirals on the central island could direct the whole fleet. 200 warships ready to sail in hours. That's the kind of power that made Rome nervous. When Rome finally beat Carthage, they systematically dismantled it, burned it, and filled in the harbor. Today, only shallow water and archaeological clues show where it once was. In ancient Rome, everyone knows the Colosseum or the Flavian Amphitheater, the empire's most famous landmark. But just south of it was something just as huge, yet much less remembered. The Baths of Caracalla, or Thermae Antoninianae, one of the largest public spaces Rome ever constructed. This AI reconstruction is based on current ruins, archaeological findings, and Roman writings. I've removed half the roof and walls to show the interior. The baths could hold 1,600 people at once. Hot rooms, cold rooms, pools, libraries, gardens, gym areas. This was Rome's social hub. Romans spent hours here working out, bathing, making deals, discussing philosophy. The ruins remain, But the life, the marble, the mosaics, the sound of water and voices in huge halls are gone. The vibrant heart of a civilization, the real wonder, the hidden engineering underneath. Water flowed from mountain aqueducts at 70 liters per second, stored in huge tanks built into the hillside. Underground, 50 brick furnaces burned constantly, heating copper tanks for 7 hot pools in the caldarium. A 3-kilometer tunnel system moved water through the complex, supplying hot baths and cold pools before draining. Now, consider the scale of this operation. Those furnaces ran 24/7, maintained by slaves working in shifts below ground. The heat didn't just warm water. It circulated through hollow floors and walls, keeping entire rooms at exact temperatures. The hillside location was intentional. Building into the slope provided natural water pressure and space for the massive furnace system without disturbing the experience above. Romans relaxing in hot pools had no idea they were sitting above an industrial operation. This level of engineering, managing water temperature, airflow, and fuel, wouldn't be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years after Rome fell. The baths operated for 3 centuries, but the technology behind them set new standards. As the Western Roman Empire declined, a new capital emerged in the east, Constantinople. At its heart was the Great Palace, a huge complex of halls, churches, gardens, and throne rooms stretching from the Hippodrome to the sea, the center of Byzantine power for over 800 years. The Great Palace was more than one building. It was a city within a city. Emperors ruled from throne rooms overlooking the Bosporus, watching ships from the Mediterranean, Black Sea, and Asian trade routes. Private harbors were located directly below the royal areas. Control the palace, control the sea. Control the sea, control the empire. This reconstruction is based on archaeological findings and Byzantine texts. On the left is the Hippodrome, where 100,000 spectators watched chariot races, with emperors watching from the royal box directly connected to the palace. In the center were grand throne rooms where emperors received foreign ambassadors in ceremonies designed to impress with Byzantine wealth and might. Just outside the palace walls stood the Hagia Sophia, the empire's most magnificent cathedral. Still here today, but the palace itself? Gone. The complex covered over 400,000 square meters. It took 15 minutes just to walk from one end to the other. Imagine walking these halls. As an emperor, you'd wake to views of the Bosporus, then sit on a golden throne as foreign kings bowed. As a soldier, you'd patrol corridors vigilant against coups. As a merchant, you'd wait for hours in antechambers, a single word away from wealth or ruin. As a slave, you'd work unseen on lower levels, keeping the empire functioning. And always, the roar of 100,000 spectators from the Hippodrome would echo through the walls. The Great Palace gradually fell apart after the 13th century, abandoned and its stones quarried. Today, only scattered ruins mark where Byzantine emperors ruled for 800 years. Empires rise and fall, but faith endures. The Great Palace is gone, yet the Hagia Sophia still dominates Istanbul's skyline, a reminder that sacred places often outlast their builders, or at least they try to. But sometimes, sacred spaces aren't destroyed by conquest or fire. They're torn down by believers themselves, seeking something greater. This is Old St. Peter's Basilica in Rome around 1450, depicted in 1891 from ancient records, built by Emperor Constantine in 330 CE on what Christians believed was the burial site of St. Peter himself. It was the holiest church in Christendom for over 1,200 years. This reconstruction is based on floor plans made just before demolition, medieval frescoes, and centuries of written descriptions. So we actually have a good idea of its appearance. This is the entrance courtyard, the atrium where pilgrims gathered before entering the basilica. Above the entrance was the famous Navicella mosaic, created around 1310, showing St. Peter walking on water. Imagine arriving here after months of travel, passing through these colonnades, the mosaic towering above you, knowing you stood at the holiest site in Christianity. For over a millennium, popes were crowned here, emperors knelt here, and millions of pilgrims crossed this threshold seeking salvation. Replaced by the grand Renaissance church standing today. A decision that erased 1,200 years of history for architectural fame. But our next cathedral had no say. It was burned to the ground. This is London in 1381. In medieval London, one building defined the skyline. Old St. Paul's Cathedral, its spire reaching higher than any in England. This 1550 drawing shows it with that iconic spire still in place. Old St. Paul's was 178 meters long, Europe's third longest cathedral. But it was the spire that truly marked London. At 149 meters tall, it overlooked everything visible for miles. This was more than just a church. It was the city's very heart. The churchyard teemed with markets. Lawyers met clients inside. Merchants closed deals in the nave. For 6 centuries, that spire endured. Then, on June 4, 1561, lightning struck. The wooden structure burned for hours as the city watched helplessly. The spire fell and was never rebuilt. For the next 105 years, Old St. Paul's stood without its crowning feature. Let's picture that. This is how it stood for the next century. Still massive, still imposing, but incomplete. The rose window on the west facade became the new main focus, a Gothic stonework marvel. Imagine walking these streets in the 1600s. The cathedral still dominated the city view, but Londoners knew something was gone. For the generation that never saw the spire, this was normal. For those who remembered, it was a constant reminder of what was lost. This 1658 engraving by Wenceslas Haller shows the interior. Rows of soaring Gothic arches led toward the altar. Imagine standing right here, dwarfed by columns soaring 30 meters above, with light filtering through ancient stained glass. Medieval England's greatest architectural triumph. By 1666, the cathedral was over 600 years old and desperately needed repairs. Then came September, and everything changed. September 2nd, 1666. The Great Fire of London had raged for 2 days through the densely packed medieval city. Londoners believed St. Paul's stone walls would withstand the fire. They were mistaken. When the fire reached the cathedral, it found scaffolding and wooden roofs dried out by centuries. The lead roof melted, flowing through the building like water. The intense heat caused stone to explode. Witnesses heard the cathedral's bells melting, crashing through burning timbers. In hours, what lightning began 105 years prior, the Great Fire finished. 600 years of history reduced to smoking ruins. London's skyline would never look the same. This is what remained. Londoners walked through the smoking rubble of their grandest cathedral, surrounded by the scorched skeleton of medieval London. The western facade still stood, hollow and broken. The rose window, once filled with intricate stonework, was now an empty void. But London rebuilt. The ruins were cleared, and between 1675 and 1710, Christopher Wren built the new St. Paul's Cathedral, the Baroque masterpiece with the iconic dome that stands today. That medieval cathedral with its soaring spire and Gothic arches, gone forever. While sacred monuments reached for the heavens, other structures became symbols of something more worldly. This is London in 1616. There's old St. Paul's. And there's Old London Bridge, another long-gone structure which I covered more in this previous video. But look here on the south bank of the Thames in Southwark. stood a building that changed English literature forever. Southwark was London's entertainment hub, where regular laws didn't really apply. The Globe stood right next to the Bear Garden, where crowds watched animals fight for sport, but only one would host the greatest works in the English language. This is where William Shakespeare's plays came to life. Between 1599 and 1613, this theater premiered Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, Macbeth, plays that defined world literature. The Globe made theater accessible to everyone, creating a shared cultural experience that had never existed before. This is a reconstruction based on archaeological evidence and surviving documents. The best guess at what the Globe actually looked like inside. A polygonal structure open to the sky in the center. 3 tiers of covered galleries wrapped around an open yard where groundlings stood for a penny. The stage jutted out into the crowd so actors were surrounded on 3 sides. No distance between performer and audience. Behind the stage was a tiring house where actors changed costumes. Above it, a balcony for scenes like the famous Romeo moment. The thatched roof covered only the galleries and stage. The yard remained open, meaning performances happened in daylight. Rain or shine, the show went on. In 1642, Puritan authorities closed all London theaters, and in 1644 the Globe was demolished. The building that gave the world Shakespeare's greatest works stood for less than 50 years in total. But in Paris, as the old world collapsed and revolution swept through Europe, one last structure would fall, torn down stone by stone as a symbol of everything they fought against. This is the Bastille in 1420, drawn from an 1886 reconstruction, 8 massive towers guarding eastern Paris. Built in the 1370s as a fortress with a moat and 30-meter walls, it defended the city for centuries. But over time its purpose changed. The fortress designed to keep enemies out became a prison to keep prisoners in, a symbol of royal power and oppression. By the early 1700s, the Bastille had become infamous. No longer a military fortress, it served as a state prison, where the king could imprison anyone with a lettre de cachet, royal orders requiring no trial, no charges, no appeal. Writers, political dissidents, religious minorities. Anyone who displeased the monarchy could disappear behind these walls. The fortress still stood imposingly above Paris, but what it represented had changed. It was no longer protection but oppression. July 14, 1789. Revolutionary crowds stormed the Bastille, attacking what the fortress represented. Centuries of royal tyranny and arbitrary imprisonment. After hours of fighting, the garrison surrendered. Inside, they found only 7 prisoners. The fortress had become more symbol than active prison. But symbols matter. Within months, the Bastille was dismantled stone by stone. Some stones were carved into souvenirs. Others were used to build bridges. The fortress that stood for 400 years was deliberately erased. Not by time or accident, but by revolution itself. July 14th is now France's national holiday. The building is gone, but what destroying it meant echoes through history. 10 legendary structures, sadly erased from Earth, but their stories endure. What should I rebuild next? Let me know what you think in the comments.